Undercover boss buys breakfast, freezes when waitress says she's living on leftovers. It was still early. The morning light slid softly across the faded tin roof of a small suburban branch of the Sunrise Diner chain. From the outside, everything seemed fine. Customers coming and going steadily, about half the tables already filled, the gentle clink of dishes, the occasional order called just enough to suggest the hum of a busy diner. But to Michael Carter, the man who had built this entire restaurant chain from just 2 chairs and a gas stove, he knew. Some things may look stable on paper, yet be rotting from within. He sat at a corner table, back to the door, an old brown coat draped over his tall, lean frame, the collar of his shirt slightly frayed. No one recognized him, and that was exactly what he needed. Lately, he'd received several anonymous reports from inside, staff quitting one after another without clear reasons, a decline in overall morale, and more critically suspicions about shady practices in the tip-sharing system. Though monthly reports still claimed the branch was performing well, Michael no longer trusted spreadsheets. He wanted to see it with his own eyes. Something in the air of the diner felt deeply wrong. There were customers, but every movement inside was stiff and robotic. The staff barely interacted, each sticking strictly to their task like machines running on a silent conveyor belt. Some avoided eye contact. Others seemed to try hard not to say anything beyond a scripted, "Yes, sir." The chill wasn't from the air conditioner, it came from an invisible order, taut like a guitar string on the verge of snapping. And then, Michael noticed her. A young, slender waitress with her hair neatly tied back, wearing a faded apron. She moved like someone attuned to the rhythm of the entire diner, pouring water at table 2, delivering eggs to table 6, bowing slightly to apologize for a late dish at a corner table. No one helped her. No one stepped in, even as her tray tilted under the weight of 4 plates. But the most striking thing, she still smiled. A thin, polite smile, but her eyes could not hide the exhaustion. They carried the look of someone sleep-deprived, long accustomed to being overwhelmed, and perhaps no longer expecting anyone to speak up for her. Michael looked at her as if seeing a much older version of himself, back when he was a line cook, back when he lived off 2 sandwiches a day and a single, humble dream to be treated with dignity. Her name was Emily. And that morning, Michael knew he had come to the right place. At exactly the right time, he sat quietly at table 7, the last one along the row, next to a dusty window pane where morning sunlight barely reached. He ordered a serving of fried eggs, toast, and black coffee. Everything appeared ordinary, so unremarkable that one could easily pass it by as just another dull Monday morning. But he wasn't there to eat. Emily, the young waitress, returned with the food tray, placing each item down with meticulous care. The coffee cup without a single spill, the cutlery set precisely, and the napkin folded into a triangle, spotless despite the greasy kitchen. Michael nodded in thanks, then asked a simple, polite question almost out of reflex. Like someone who'd spent decades behind a stove, "Have you had breakfast yet?" The question was light, but the answer cut through his long-held beliefs like a blade. Emily smiled, not forced, not performed, just a thin smile, like early winter mist. "I just eat what customers leave behind. Sometimes I get something, sometimes not. I'm used to it." No tragedy was exaggerated. No pain was displayed. Just a truth, delivered in a flat tone, as if talking about the weather. But to Michael, that sentence struck directly at what he once vowed would never happen in the empire he had built. He had once believed, a decent restaurant isn't measured by how good its food is, or its quarterly earnings, but by how it treats the one carrying the heaviest tray, the one leaving last, the one enduring the most with no one noticing people like Emily. And if, in a place that bore the Sunrise name, someone was surviving on leftover scraps, then the system was cracked at its roots. Michael said nothing more. But from that moment on, he was no longer just a diner. He was a CEO, sitting in the shadows of the very model he had created. And he started counting Emily's steps, each table she passed, each transaction, and everything that never got logged. Because he knew, behind that fragile smile, was a truth that needed to be brought to light with all the illumination a person could carry. Michael didn't eat, nor did he drink the coffee. He simply sat there, silently, the eyes behind his thin-rimmed glasses tracking every movement inside the diner, but this time, not as a stranger, but as an owner tracing the fault lines of a broken system. Emily was practically running the entire front row by herself. From table 3 to table 11, she took orders, delivered meals, poured water, apologized for slow service, cleaned up a broken glass at the kids' table, and quietly replaced a runny egg for a fussy customer. No one helped. Not a single complaint. She just kept going. Meanwhile, behind the counter, Ryan and Jason's shirts crisp, shoes gleaming handled just 2 or 3 regulars. Those who ordered the same each week, always paid by card. They lounged, occasionally chatting with the manager. But what caught Michael's attention most wasn't in their words or even their service. Every time a customer stood up to pay by card event at tables Emily had served from beginning to end, Ryan or Jason would step in. No one told them to. No assignments were made. But Emily would always take a step back softly, silently, as if it were a reflex ingrained into her. Michael frowned. He pulled out his phone and accessed the Sunrise management system using his top-tier administrative credentials access that no one at the branch could override or conceal. Selected branch number 23. PO system, access rights. Ryan L. ID R. Langford. Full pause access. Jason M. Pause subrole. Afternoon only. Emily D. No POS credentials assigned. Michael navigated to system updates. Manual configuration. Patch ID 5.4.2. Implementation date 5 weeks ago. Approved by Doug Hayes, branch manager. Update note. Optimize morning transaction flow. Reduce processing errors. Additional setting. All digital tips under $15 are automatically routed to IDR Langford. Michael exhaled cold and slow. Doug Hayes, the branch manager, who once declared to the entire region, "Fairness is the core of Sunrise. Those who do more deserve more." And now, he was the one who had signed off on a manual system, patch bypassing oversight, designed to funnel all sub-$15 digital tips into his nephew's account. Emily? No ID, no POS access, no system record of the work she was doing. She was functioning as a crucial cog in the operation, yet had been erased from every distribution ledger. Not a technical glitch, not a reporting error, but a deliberate fraud mechanism wrapped in shiny, deceptive language. Workflow optimization. Michael looked up and saw Emily kneeling to pick up a dropped towel from her tray, nodding an apology to a customer, though the mistake wasn't hers. And in that moment, he knew the thing that was broken wasn't the software. It was the very core of ethics, the foundation he had once laid for the entire system. And if he didn't stop it, then Sunrise would no longer be worthy of its name. Michael kept his eyes on the girl standing there. But this time, he didn't just see Emily as an employee hurt by the system. He was seeing a symbol of the many people who had been rendered invisible under the very flag he had once raised. He continued checking the POS access logs. Every card transaction under $15 over the past 5 weeks was routed to one single name, R. Langford. Regardless of who served the table, regardless of whom the customer thanked, regardless of who received the words, "Thanks for your care," the person recorded was always the last one to touch the machine. Michael clicked into a random entry, Table 8, Tuesday, 9:42 a.m. Order placed by Emily. The entire service duration logged by security cameras under her name. But the card transaction? POS operated by Ryan. Tip, $9.5. Recorded recipient, R. Langford. He repeated this check 7 more times. The result didn't change. Then, one record made him freeze. A young female customer, her transaction ended with a note from the POS. Customer requested tip be given specifically to the table server, Emily. The note was overwritten by a system response. Override applied, tips rerouted to default ID, R. Langford. Michael placed his phone down on the table. He didn't need more evidence. What he needed now were answers and action. But before standing up, he looked at Emily once more. She was crouching, wiping up a water streak near table 11. An elderly woman gently touched her shoulder, whispering something. Emily only nodded slightly, her hand still holding the cloth. That moment felt like a slap to the very concept of workflow optimization, used by someone to strip away the most rightful part of what honest workers had earned. Michael turned back to the iPad. He opened another tab, Incident Flag and Response, a system accessible only to senior leadership. For the first time in months, he activated it. Flag code CR423. Branch number 23. Priority level, critical, ethics violation. Initiated by M. Carter. In the response field, he typed just one line. Fairness cannot be optional. At Sunrise, it must be the default. He hit send. Then he looked up, picked up the cold coffee cup on the tableau not to drink, but to hold firmly. Because he knew, tomorrow everything would begin to change. Not from a spreadsheet, but from a person who understood that if the first moral flaw wasn't corrected, then every update afterward would only be a form of complicity. 1 week later, Friday morning. The sky was clear and cold. Wind swept past the diner's glass windows, carrying a chill, as if even the air were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. 6:58 a.m. The door swung open. Gone was the discreet figure of an anonymous guest. Michael Carter, founder of Sunrise Diner, stepped in. Back straight, a face that needed no introduction. Behind him followed Julia, head of human resources, two auditors, and a POS system technician. Doug Hayes, the branch manager, was adjusting his collar behind the counter. Seeing them, he froze, eyes darting quickly between Michael and the computer beside him. Ryan Langford, his nephew, took a step back, as if instinctively aware of what was coming. Michael didn't need a lengthy speech. He signaled to Julia. She placed a small speaker on the counter and connected it to his tablet. And then, a recording played soft, yet echoing like a bell exposing the truth. Just funnel all tips under $15 to Ryan. Small amounts, no one notices. That girl has no right to split anything. Just let the system route it to Ryan. Doug approved it. Just run it. No one spoke. The entire diner fell still. A few elderly customers froze mid-spoonful of soup, eyes shifting from Michael to Doug, then to Emily, who stood motionless by the tea counter, still holding a glass of water she hadn't had time to put down. Michael opened his tablet, connecting it to the large display behind the counter. POS system report, branch number 23. 100% of digital tips under $15 in the last 5 weeks. ID R. Langford. Total transactions, 412. Name Emily D. Not listed in any record. Doug stepped forward hastily, his voice hoarse. We were just optimizing peak hour processing. Lots of customers. We needed faster transactions. Michael turned to face him, not angry, but with a calm, cold disappointment that ran deep. You optimized it so your nephew could collect all the tips every shift. He paused, turning his gaze to Emily, the girl who lived quietly, surviving each breakfast on leftovers, while Emily lived off what customers left behind. A long, heavy breath like a gavel falling. That's not optimization. That's theft. No one objected. No one defended. Only Ryan, face pale, set the POS terminal down, as if it had turned into something untouchable. Julia stepped forward and declared, firmly, Doug Hayes and Ryan Langford are terminated immediately. All system access is revoked. Their records will be forwarded to the legal department for internal fraud investigation. A few employees clenched their fists. A guest set down his spoon and gave a slight nod, as if he'd been waiting for this moment for a long time. Michael turned toward the back of the room. Emily. She looked up. For the first time, no one looked past her. Every eye settled not in pity, but in recognition. Would you step forward? She gently placed the glass of water down and walked to the center of the diner. She didn't bow her head. She said nothing. But her eyes, after so many weary days now, shone clear and steady, no longer trembling. And for the first time, Sunrise Diner had spoken the name of someone who had once been erased from every earnings sheet. No ceremony was needed. No applause. Just a single moment when the truth stood in the middle of the diner, quiet yet undeniable. Emily stood in the center. The whole room seemed to pause with every breath she took. No one spoke. No one reached out. But every gaze upon her stood in for the apology this system had owed her for far too long. Michael nodded to Julia. An employee brought over a small document pouch containing the new POS system access profile, her updated work schedule, and a thin envelope labeled, Tip Recovery for Last Month, Emily D. Emily received it with both hands, but didn't open it yet. She looked at Michael with the same eyes of someone who still couldn't believe she deserved decency. This isn't a gift, Michael said. This is your share. The part you earned, the part no one ever had the right to take. Just then, from the far side of the diner, a small boy, maybe 6 or 7, tugged on his mother's sleeve and whispered, That's the lady who helped me get napkins last time. I remember. Endo. The mother nodded and whispered back, Today, she's the one standing in the middle of everything. Those words didn't need to be loud. But for Emily, they were enough to bring tears spilling from her eyes, not out of sadness, but because for the first time, she wasn't overlooked. Michael turned to the rest of the diner and for the first time spoke like it was a declaration. Sunrise doesn't exist because of a recipe. Sunrise exists because of people who choose to stay kind and who are willing to stand up even when everything tells them to stay silent. He looked toward the other staff, the ones who had once stayed silent or unsure or afraid to speak. If there's anyone who's ever been excluded just because they weren't someone's relative, then today the door has reopened. No one spoke, but the nods, the clenched hands, and the deep, silent breaths were the most honest responses he could have hoped for. Emily stepped back, but this time, not to make room, but to prepare to step forward in a new role, with her long-lost value restored. And in that brief moment, as Michael turned to leave, he glanced back just once, as if to etch into memory the image of someone who once stood invisible, now standing in the light. A system should not be run by command. It must be run by justice. And today, justice was served. Hot, direct, and without needing extra seasoning. 1 month later, the morning light came late. Thin mist still lingered on the edge of the glass window at Sunrise Diner, branch number 23. But inside, everything had changed. The space wasn't just tidier, it carried a different kind of warmth. Not from the kitchen, but from the eyes of the people working there. Right above the register, a new digital sign hung neatly, its background a clean, translucent glow. Tip-sharing policy, transparent, public, protected. Beneath it, a small line etched directly into wood. Every shift, every dollar, every voice. The POS system had been updated. Every employee now had access. They could track tip distribution in real time. No more privileges, no more defaults. Every effort was now seen. Michael Carter walked in, unannounced. He didn't need to be. He simply nodded at the young staffer behind the counter, a new face, but eyes full of trust. The person smiled and whispered, "Our manager said your usual table by the window is reserved." Michael smiled. Still the same table, the one where, a month ago, he had heard a confession that seemed light as air. "I just eat what customers leave behind." Today, a hot cup of coffee was placed in front of him by a hand that was once frail from hunger, now strong with justice. Emily. On her chest, a new name tag shimmered under the morning light. Emily, branch manager. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," she said, her smile no longer forced. Michael lifted the cup, letting the warmth spread through his fingers. He looked around, seeing every staff member at work, neither rushed nor hesitant. Each person had their role, their space clearly defined, transparent, and fair. Then he looked into Emily's eyes, and his voice dropped, as if meant only for her. "The most important things in a restaurant aren't on the menu. They are trust, dignity, and the courage to speak up, even when no one thinks your voice matters." Emily didn't reply, but she sat down without asking, because now she was no longer on the sidelines of the conversation. She was living proof that a system could be rebuilt when kind people dared to speak up. Outside the window, a new employee was guiding a guest through the POS check-in. On the small screen, the tip-sharing section clearly displayed every name, including ED, 4 transactions this morning. Michael smiled faintly, placing the coffee back down not because of the caffeine, but because he knew justice doesn't begin with applause. It begins the moment a forgotten voice is heard. And sometimes, all it takes is a question that seems harmless. "Have you had breakfast yet?" Under the morning light, with dewdrops still clinging to the outside window, inside Sunrise Diner, the atmosphere continued to transform, sparked by a question that seemed small. Emily leaned over to refill the glass of an elderly guest near Michael's table. A gentle gesture, nothing elaborate. But this time, the guest smiled and softly said, "Thank you, manager." She paused, briefly, not from surprise, but because she was slowly growing used to that title. Not a label, but a real role. A position she had earned not through connections, but through resilience. Michael glanced up at the tip distribution board, updating in real time. Under each column of numbers, every employee's name appeared: Anna, Diego, Min, Lisa, and Emily. No more hidden entries. No more the fault codes. He took another sip of coffee. At that moment, a young girl, maybe 18, her hair tied up high, timidly approached Emily. "Miss Emily, may I ask your advice about the guests at table 5? They want to change their order, but I'm not sure how to note it in the POS." Emily stood, gave a slight nod, then turned to Michael. "Excuse me for a minute, Mr. Carter." Michael inclined his head gently. "From now on, you don't need permission to do the right thing." She smiled and walked away. And in every step, Michael saw the very thing that once existed only in his vision, a system that ran not just on process, but on trust and transparency. From afar, Julia, head of HRAD, just entered. She gave Michael a quiet nod, then gestured toward the entrance. A group of new interns was walking in for their first orientation. Michael took a deep breath, and in that moment he knew what he had planted from day one, thought to have crumbled beneath fraudulent updates, was sprouting again through people like Emily. And those new employees would soon learn, no software teaches kindness. No protocol replaces courage. I too pints. A cup of coffee can grow cold, But the memory of justice, when poured for the right person at the right time, holds its warmth far longer than time ever could. And this time, sunrise had truly stepped into the dawn it was named for.